Okay, hello everyone. We're from Group 5, and today we are going to present our project for human-computer interaction titled Lumen Dictionary. So the progress of our project will span over 5 weeks, beginning with the feasibility study on October 11 and the completion of project reports by November 30th. So here is the work division. My name is Richard as the coordinator. And then we have Aaron, Jason, and Ronaldo working on the database. Anastasya, Ryan, and Ryo in the user interface design.
In background colors, sophistication and elegance are key. This is illustrated by using a dark theme in its implementation. We also use another colors such as gray, magenta, blue, and purple. These colors represent intelligence, transformation, wisdom, and dependability in accordance to how we want our users to perceive Lumen. The implementation is done simply by the user of glabels. In each and every gframe's main gpanels, a glabel is adjusted to 1540 times 840 for the maximum size of the application, and after adjusting the size of the glabel, add an icon that matches the page of the application. Now we move on to button and icons. Buttons have the main function as an executor that can send a particular command. The icons represent the page contained in it. Also, the button contains text to reaffirm the user that the action is exact as to what the user wants to do. In addition to the already responsive button, to reaffirm the user before clicking on the button, a hover effect is added to visually affirm that the button is indeed clickable. Implementation of the buttons are done with the use of gbuttons and glabels. The reason for this variation is a border glow effect that does not follow the button shapes other than a rectangle when a G button is pressed. This is especially a problem for bigger buttons that are not rectangular, as it is much more visible, like the main menu buttons, as can be seen with the defined main menu button. After placing the G buttons or G label in the G panel, an image of the button is added via icon in properties. Once the icon is inserted, the size and position is also adjusted accordingly. After completing the visual adjustment, the buttons are given a mouse click event that runs the desired function when clicked. Some G labels that are hoverable also have an additional mouse enter event added to replace the current icon into an alternative version when the cursor is above it, and mouse exit event to revert it back when the cursor is away from it.
And so the next one, we will talk about the cursor variations. So while it may seem trivial, the difference in cursor design will affect predictability when using a software greatly, which in this case is to help identify an object is interactable and what function it may serve. And the design that being used in Lumen will be the generic arrow, hand, and text cursor that is a default as shown. The arrow cursor represents the user's current position on the screen. The hand arrow represents an interactable object, and the text cursor represents an editable text field. And the next one, the cursors, as said before, are that of the default variations in which NetBeans already has. Implementing the variations are done by right-clicking on each component that needs a cursor variation and selecting the properties menu. The cursor variation will be under the Other Properties category. And clicking on the far right of the cursor label will open another panel that shows an array of cursor variations as shown. And in this case of Lumen, the implemented cursors are default arrow, hand, and text as shown. And so the default cursor is configured automatically for every component on NetBeans, and so only the hand and text will require configuration. And as mentioned before, the hand cursor will represent interactable objects, mainly buttons, icons, and labels. And the text cursor, on the other hand, will represent editable text fields. Implementation on each of the above-mentioned cursors are done accordingly to what each represents. So the next one, we'll talk about the fonts. A critical part of the Lumen interface design is the use of proper fonts to represent the brand image well to potential users. And based on the feasibility study done previously, it was concluded that Lumen will need a clean and professional looking font to increase credibility as a dictionary. And the feasibility study also concluded a font family that fits the criteria of the Lumen software. And that is Fira Sans, an open source font used in the Mozilla Firefox browser. Not only is it aesthetically pleasing with the sans font style, it is also easy to read based on the survey done in one of the feasibility study articles.
So the fonts leads the design team to use it as the main font for buttons, menus, and bodies of text. To further enhance the clear division in the design of Lumen, a second font was introduced, which is Acumin Variable Concept Regular, a font by Adobe. The second font is used to design the Lumen logo and is mainly used for window titles and headings to differentiate itself from the body of text. Now we'll talk about splash screens. It is commonly used within applications to let the user know that the program is in the process of loading. So here we have the splash screen of Lumen. It has a progress bar inside it. The splash screen is closed automatically as soon as the progress bar reaches 100%. To implement the splash screen, a JPanel is created with a width of 350 pixels times 150 pixels. This coordinate denotes the position of the panel inside the JFrame container. So inside the splash screen, we have the Lumen logo and the progress bar. So as described in the previous section, the splash screen of Lumen will feature a progress bar. And the delay before the login page is shown is 2.5 seconds. As shown in this picture is the implementation. So ideally, a splash screen should be positioned at the center of the screen. So we use the Java method set location relative to and set the value to null. This is a method to set the splash screen position at the center of the screen.
So the next one is the login page. We divided the login page into two parts, which is the left pane for signing up and also a login on the right side. And the fields, as can be seen, has like a username and a password and also a sign-in button. And the separation is done on purpose so that the users won't accidentally press the wrong buttons when they want to do an action.
The login page, as mentioned earlier in the feasibility study, the page is a full screen frame with the size of mentioned in the text, which is then divided into two. One at the left, one is for the sign up, which contains a single J button sign up, and then the right pane is for signing in, which feature one J text field for entering username and one J password field for password input. In addition, a clickable J label name "Forgot your password" is available in case the user forgets their password and want to reset it. Finally, there's a sign in button, which is located below the label.
To validate user credential input, we must query the database in order to match given credentials with database records. To do this, first create a function limit. This function will be used in the next section to limit login attempts. Inside this function, create a try-catch block to accommodate SQL prepared statements in order to query the database. Make a string containing the query, select username, password from login, where username equal question mark and password equal question mark. This is an SQL prepared statement, and the two question marks will be replaced by user input obtained using getText methods.
So as mentioned in the feasibility study, Lumen will implement a feature to limit login attempts. So when a user enters invalid credentials for 3 consecutive times, they will not be able to log into our application. So the user needs to restart Lumen in order to try another attempt. So every time a user performs a login attempt, this function limit is called, and the counter variable attempt increases. So when the counter reaches 3, the application will display an error message as shown. So the user will not be able to perform any more login attempts unless they restart the application.
As humans, there are probabilities for users to forget a lot of things, including their password. Lumen anticipates such event by implementing a forget password feature, in which users can reset their password by providing their username and email address, which they previously used to register for an account. To implement this feature, we first create a form like the register form, containing 4 input fields. Those 4 fields are the username, email address, and new password reentry. When the reset button is clicked, a try-catch block is implemented. It queries to update the password stored in the database for a given user identified by their username and email address. If the process is successful, the new password is stored in the database. User will now be able to log in using the new password. However, if a user provides invalid data, the application will return an error pop-up and they must start over.
Before the user is able to log in and use the feature of the application, they first must to register their for an account. The register page contains 6 input fields. The forms required for the user to enter are name, email address, desired username, desired passwords, and a Captcha challenge for added security measure. All of the input fields must be filled before proceeding to the next step. Within the form, there is a checker procedure which will check whenever an input field is empty and alerts the user if such a field is found. In addition, another checker procedure will be implemented to check if the user tries to register using a username that has been registered by someone else. Before a user will be able to log in and use the feature of our application, they first must register for an account. This is done by clicking the sign up button in the login page. And then the user will be presented with a register form, which has 6 input fields. The form requires the user to enter their name, email address, desired username, desired password, and a Captcha challenge, which was explained earlier. Initially, these components are not editable. The users must click one of the input text fields first before they are able to input the text. This is done to prevent unintentional input or accidental key press. Next, the register form requires a procedure to check whenever all input fields are filled by the user. This is done. Must be done to prevent errors or exception when trying to insert data into the database due to an empty input fields. To implement this, we need to create an if-else block. The first condition checks whenever the user has entered the matching password 2 times, and then the second condition checks whenever the user has entered their name. The third one checks whenever the user has filled their email address. The fourth one, whenever the user has entered their desired username. And the fifth one checks whenever the user has entered a password. And then the sixth one checks whenever the user has completed the Captcha challenge. Finally, when all the conditions are met, the data is inserted into the database and the user will be presented with the login page. As an added security measure, Lumen implement a Captcha challenge every time a user requests to register an account or reset their password. This is a text-based Captcha containing 10 random alphanumerical characters. To create a Captcha generator, first create a function and name it Captcha gen. This function will contain a randomizer to generate random alphanumerical characters using the instring method of Java random class. Set the left limit to 48, which is the SC code of 0, and the right limit of 122, which is the SC code of the letter Z. These limits are required as the lower and upper bounds for the randomizer. The Captcha string is created using a string builder, which is a Java method to convert a string in a sequence into a string readable by humans. Next, we convert the generated string into an array of characters. Then implement a condition to check whenever the Captcha array of characters and entered by the user match the generated array. If it doesn't match, the application will display an error message. If it match, the program execution can continue. The implemented is as shown on the below right picture.
Prevent duplicate data stored in the database, we must implement a procedure to check whether the desired username or an email address of a user is already recorded in the database. This is implemented through a try-catch block. On the try block, create a prepared statement to query the database based on input obtained from the username field and email field. Check the result of the query through an if-else condition. If the return query result match user input from one of the input fields, the application will display an error.
So an issue raised on the feasibility study is privacy concerns. So we will implement a privacy concern dialog in which after the user completes the registration form, the application will display a dialog message asking for user consent to have their personal data collected. So here is the privacy concern dialog. User is able to select yes or no. If the user chooses yes, the application will display a pop-up telling that the user registration is successful and will store the data in the database. But else, if the user chooses no, the application will cancel the registration process.
To insert registration data to the database, we must create a try-catch block on register.java. After the user agrees to the privacy consent request explained in the previous section. Inside the try block, create an SQL prepared statement with the following query. Insert into login, name, username, email, password, values, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. The 4 question mark will be replaced by name, username, email address, and password obtained by the name field, username field, email field, and password field respectively.
The main menu of Lumen. Main menu is the primary list of options available to the user of an application. So it is the starting point of Lumen. It helps the user navigate within the application more easily. So we have 3 buttons here. The first 2 buttons, which are translate and define, directs users to one of the 2 key features of this application. While the third button, exit, returns the user to the login screen. And the one more button on the left side of the screen is a burger button, which toggles a sidebar. So as mentioned earlier, there are 3 large JLabel buttons, which are translate, define, and exit. And this is the coding implementation. Next, we'll talk about the sidebar, which is located on the left-hand side. If the burger button is pressed, there are 3 buttons inside the sidebar, which are word of the day, help file, and about. While the sidebar is active, the main menu will be blurred as shown in this picture.
And to implement the sidebar, the if-else condition is implemented that contains set visible functions where whenever the burger button is clicked, the menus and the sidebar, all of the sidebar elements are set to visible, and the vice versa. And the next one we'll talk about word of the day. So upon clicking on the burger icon, just like the sidebar, the word of the day will appear on the right side of the blurred area. So how it works is that a JPanel is first placed to categorize the part of the word of the day, and on that JPanel we'll add a few JLabels to contain the text, and for the text itself, it will be connected later. And so this is how it is connected. Each of these fields and area are then connected to the database to show the word of the day, where rest world LBL being the word itself, rest type being the word form, and rest define being word meaning or definition. And the way it works is every time a user opens word of the day, the word will be printed to the screen by the set text functions. And the next we'll talk about the help file. So again, like the word of the day and the sidebar itself, once you click on the burger icon, navigate yourself to the help menu, and you will see 2 frequently asked questions, which is how to use define and how to use translate. And so clicking on either FAQs will open a new page consisting of a 3-page tutorial. And so it is basically, the first page is an overview, and the next pages are a detail about each of the components. And so the help file, again, is 3 pages, and they are made of 3 JFrame forms. And so these 3 JFrame forms include help file Java, and that is the help file main menu when you click on the menu of the sidebar, the help define Java, and the define, which is the define help file, and the help translate Java, the translate help file. And clicking on either JLabels will direct the user according to the label. So the next one is the define feature. So this is one of the main features of Lumen itself, which is finding a word. And to tackle this environment, we have to carefully design it. And so, as can be seen on the picture, on the left side, we made it simple by giving a list. If the user wants to just decisively want to find a word without actually typing, and they will also have a choice of input field on the right top side of typing it themselves if they have a word on their mind. So the list provided will have few buttons from A to Z, and each a category of buttons will show the corresponding alphabetical words. And of course, both functions will then display the definition on the empty box provided below their input field, like whether the person searches using the list or the input field. And again, as said before, the list can be used for learning random words, while the input field can be used for when the user knows what word they're going to search for.
To implement the define feature, we must create 9 JPanels. So each panel contains 3 letters A, B, C, D, E, F, and so on. And to implement the search feature, we must create 2 JText fields, one for input and one for output, and 1 JLabel button for the search button. Aside from clicking the search button, users can also press the enter key as a keyboard shortcut to immediately search for a word definition. When the enter key is pressed, the application will send a query to the database.
The next one is translate feature. This is the second main feature of Lumen, which is the ability to translate from Indonesian to English and vice versa. So to accommodate this function, it is again divided into two parts in the likes of define, a list on the left and an input field on the right as shown in the picture. So the list is designed basically the same way as define, but this time with a list preference on the left side to choose what language will be displayed on the list. And basically, the input field is also exactly the same, with a single field with an initiation button aside from having a text over it saying type here to avoid confusion on where the user have to type in. And basically, a placeholder reading out Indonesian and English is also provided this time as a visual cue on what mode the user is in on the result field, which is on the bottom right. And to switch the language on the input field itself, a button below it with an icon of an opposing arrow is provided. The reason for providing the two arrows, the two types of function is the same as before, different use and user preference.
So similar to the define feature, the translate feature contains the same list panel and search bar, but the difference is the presence of radio buttons and switch buttons. This is the sample coding implementation. So we will use an if-else condition block. If the English radio button is selected, the application will send English query and vice versa. Aside from the radio buttons, as mentioned earlier, there is a switch button. So when the switch button is pressed, the application triggers the text field of a language to be visible. To avoid crashing the application if a query fails to return a result, or when a user searches for a word that has no definition or meaning stored in the database, we need to make an error handling procedure. So when the query returns no results, an exception is thrown by the Sql connection, and then an error pop-up will be shown. So forms used throughout the application also varies in size and functions. So every form existing also is form caption, in which they have a placeholder that fills the empty forms. So since this is a dictionary application, so the input-output functions will be focused on the two key features, which are translate and define. Lumen accepts input in two forms. First, users can select a word from the list on the left pane. And second, users can directly search for the desired word simply by typing on the search bar. Both inputs yield the same output.
The next one is about questionnaire and evaluation. The questionnaire consists of 4 sections: introduction, respondent identity, design preview, design rating. The first section, introduction, is to provide preliminary information about the application that is being developed. This is to ensure that respondents have sufficient background knowledge of the application to answer the questionnaire, therefore producing accurate data for further statistical testing. The second section, which is the respondent identity section, here respondent will be asked to input their name or initial and their age group. The third section, the design preview, respondent will be presented with screen capture of the final design for Lumen. The fourth and the last section of the questionnaire, which is the design rating section, here users have the chance to give a rating for the design of Lumen.
In total, we got 30 response. So and when we are conducting the t-test, the hypothesis is as follows. The null hypothesis is that the mu is less or equals than mu or the alternative hypothesis is that the mu is more than mu o, and the value that we got from the table yields the value of 1.699. Therefore, the alternative hypothesis is false and is rejected. Which means, in conclusion, the Lumen interface is accepted with the desired score of 8 out of 10 by 95% of the population. To evaluate the ANOVA, we separate the data into into two groups according to the age, which is 12 to 16 and 17 to 25. The hypothesis is that the new hypothesis are the age group have a significant impact in on the design rating, and the alternative is that the age group doesn't have a significant impact on the design rating. Our goal is to determine if the difference in age group have a significant impact on the design rating. Our calculation yields the value of 0.6884, while the value from the table is 3.2296. What this means is that we accept the alternative hypothesis and reject the null hypothesis, which means that the age group doesn't have a significant impact on the design rating.
Next, we're gonna talk about the SQL connection. To connect our application to the SQLite database, we make use of the SQLite GDBC driver. Download the driver file and put it in the same directory as the source code. Create a Java class, name it connectdb.java. Make two Java methods. The first method, connectdb, is used to connect the application with the Word Bank database. The second method, connectlogin, is used to connect the application with the user database.
For the database structure, Lumen will use two databases. The first is user database and the second is Word Bank database. The user database uses username as its primary key, and it also have password, email, and name.
Okay, the next one is the database structure. So the Word database structure are divided into 4 columns. The first one is words as its primary key. And then the second one is word type. The third one is definition, and the fourth is meaning. Limitation considerations. The first one is software efficiency. Our codes might not be the most efficient. The second limitation is technical skill. Not all group members are familiar with Java programming. The third one is SQLite database cannot be encrypted. Lumen database are not passworded. And the fourth one is time constraint. All features must be implemented in less than 7 weeks.
So the next one we'll talk about prototype considerations and redesign. So at first we saw that the design was okay, but when we tried experimenting on implementing it, it was just not right. So the first one we changed was the layout of the buttons and the buttons themselves. Basically, we made the buttons more even and gave them a bigger area for the users to click on. And so the next one is the word of the day that was redesigned, where it was previously shown to have previous days. And now we actually cut that because after a few trial and error, it just did not give a satisfying result. So it was discarded from the final product. So like the history feature on word of the day feature, The recent search feature, as shown, was currently not feasible as well, so we cut that too. So as a result, as seen on the sidebar, there's only 3 menus. So the main feature of Lumen, which is defined, also differs quite greatly from the prototype as shown, and most noticeably the interface color. And this is done mainly for cosmetic reasons, in this case, which gives a much truer dark theme. And otherwise, function-wise, it's the same. But it has a list function which has buttons to actually navigate it instead of actually having a search field this time. And so this is done to give an initial start for the user to search for a random word, basically, when they're trying to learn something new instead of having to type the alphabet on their own for words to pop up. And of course, the input field was also designed to have a button as well. And of course, the last item on the list is the second main feature, which is translate. And just like the main feature, which is defined, the translate had its interface color changed, of course, the same reason. And the difference, of course, is on the list, which has a button for the list preference. Okay, so the first usability rule is predictability. So each part of the application has been optimized for predictability, and this is done basically by appropriately timed feedback, essentially non-deterministic delays. And if we do have a delay, we will give a kind of visual cue like this progress bar. And of course, like the noticeable one is when clicking buttons and menus, the delays are very short. And aside from having appropriate feedback, the affordance or logical constraints are also used to indicate actions by arranging menu based on primary function. Just like define is the main function, translate is the second function, and exit is, of course, like the least priority here.
The second usability rules is familiarity. The familiarity principle is concerned with the ability of an interactive system to allow a user to map prior experience, either real world or gain from interaction with other system, onto the feature of a new system. We make our design similar to Google application. For example, our sidebar is commonly used across other applications. We have styling page that make user immediately know what to do because we design our application with the inspiration from other similar application. We look at sidebar design from other application and implement it to our design. This will make first-time user understand immediately to our design and can use our application without need to learn anything. We pick commonly used icons so people can understand the meaning of the logo right away. The user only need to see the button logo to know what the button does without reading the text.
Next is synthesizability. It means that to support the user, sebentar ulang. The next is synthesizability. It supports the user to access the effects of past operations on the current state. What it means is that the user can notice a change that was a result from a previous action. In Lumen, for example, it is implemented when we are searching for words. After we input it, it will show the results which show the change in the process.
So next we'll talk about consistency, which focuses on the likenesses in input, output before similar situations or test objectives. So in Lumen, the layout patterns for the two main features, which is define and translate, are consistent. And also recurring buttons are also placed consistently on the upper left of the screen, like this back button. And also keyboard shortcuts are consistent, which are the enter button.
The next one is general leasability. This interactive design principle provides support for the user to extend knowledge of specific interaction within and across application to new but similar situation. For example, cut, copy, paste operation within Microsoft Office application use the same shortcut keys. Shortcut that are usually used can be used in our application. User can use Ctrl+C to copy and Ctrl+V to paste, so there will be a small learning curve to use our application.
The dialogue initiative in our application, it provides the user some or a feedback that can inform them about the action they are performing. Our application applies the rule in which it provides feedback when we finish signing up our account or when we entered the wrong account information in the login section. And also, back button on the top left corner of the application, it is used to abandon or cancel the current action the user is doing.
Okay, the next one is multi-threading. Multi-threading is one of the aspects of flexibility. Multi-threading allows the user to perform more than one task at a time. There are two types of multi-threading. The first one is concurrent. Concurrently allows input to multiple tasks simultaneously. The second is interleave. Interleave allows many tasks but only one input at a time. A thread is the flow of execution from beginning to end of a task in a program. Lumen is made from Java. With Java, you can launch multiple threads from program concurrently. These threads can be executed simultaneously in multiprocessor systems. In a single processor system, multi-threads share CPU time.
Next is test migratability, which is the ability to move performance of text to another entity. In this case, from the user to the application. In Lumen, one of the example is the word list function, where the user can refer to the application to search up a list of words within certain alphabetical range.
Substitutivity is an aspect in flexibility that is aimed to help the user use the app the way they want to without sacrificing the results. In Lumen, the define and translate feature caters to this in terms of searching for the definition or translation of the word they want. The user can either find a word by point and click using a word type list or type the word in manually using the input field just above the result.
The next one is customizability. Customizability and flexibility is modifiability of the user interface by the user or the system. So customizability is using adaptivity and adaptability as its principles. By using customizability on Lumen applications, it will determine how the Lumen interface will work better. Lumen is implementing adaptivity as its principle to modify interface by systems. Customization by system can enhance users' experience, but only when carefully implemented. The system will identify users and deliver to them the content, experience, or functionality that match the user. One of the examples of customizability in Lumen is Word of the Day, where the system gives the content to the user.
Observability has become an important term, especially when we were talking about running production system. Observability helps us to understand the internals of our production system by asking questions from the outside. Observability is what will help us to be better when troubleshooting in production. We'll need to zoom in and zoom out over and over again and do everything we can to answer new questions to find out what causing problems. Recoverability is the ability of software to restore the required level of performance and operational data affected by errors. Recovery testing is done by order to check how fast and better the application can recover after it has gone through any type of crash or hardware failure, and etc. In software engineering, recoverability testing is a type of non-functional testing. Non-functional testing refers to aspect of the software that may not be related to specific function or user action, such as scalability or security.
The next one is responsiveness. This is an important part of the user experience because it's basically how the experience of the user when they're using the app. The feedback, of course, must match with action. And as mentioned in the interface design rules by David Aspinall of Informatics University of Edinburgh, Echoing an input must be below 0.1 seconds, page turning must be below 0.5 seconds, and string search must be below 4 seconds. So Lumen has implemented these guidelines, and when the delay is inevitable, the time affordance is provided like the splash screen encountered when the user first starts the application up.
So next we'll talk about task conformance, which is the degree of the system, the degree to which the system supports the user's task. So here we improve task conformance by identifying core tasks such as define and translate, and focusing on how the application supports various actions so the user could perform optimally on those core tasks. So here we have two aspects. The first one is capability of Lumen to support the entire task a user wishes to perform, and the understanding of the task a user is about to perform. So here we have clear and concise button labeling for core tasks to help the user understand the expected outcome of each task. And Lumen is expected to be able to offer complete support for the entire task performed by the user. And the task process for each core task is similar, so users could maximize the result of the task.
Next, we're gonna discuss about the user manual. First, you need to install Java. Minimum requirement is the Java 11. And then navigate to the installation folder and launch lumen.jar. And then to register for an account, click on the sign up button and fill out the registration form. All text fields shall be filled. If a user attempt to register using a username or email address that has been registered before, there will be an error coming up about the username and email already registered. And if the user submit form with one or more input field left blank, there will be error coming up about the input field blank. If the user enters an incorrect answer of the Captcha challenge, there will be an error about the Captcha does not match. Logging in, enter username and password located on the right panel of login page. If the user enter incorrect credential for 3 consecutive attempts, there will be an error about the login limit reach. Using the define feature, click the define button on the main menu to accessing the define feature. There will be a word list, and you can select an alphabetic group by clicking on the corresponding button. You can reset the list by clicking on clear button, and there will be a search bar that the user can enter a word on the search bar above the result field. If the request word has no definition stored within the database, there will be an error about no definition found. Using the translate feature, the user can use accessing the translate feature by clicking the translate button on the main menu. A user select a preferred language by clicking on one of the 2 radio buttons. Aside from choosing word from the word list, users are able to directly type in the word they want to translate on the search bar. User also can switch the search language by clicking on the switch button, which has the 2-directional arrow logo. If the requested word has no translation stored within the database, error will pop up about the no translation found. Using the word of the day feature, user can accessing the sidebar the burger shape button on the top left of the main menu. Assessing the word of the day feature can user can access the word of the day feature by clicking on the word of the day button label inside the sidebar. Accessing the help file. The user can access the help file by clicking on the help button label inside the sidebar. Use the arrow button located on the bottom left of the page by to navigate inside the help file. Resetting password. Accessing the reset password feature by navigate to the right panel of login page. Click on the label button titled Forget Your Password, and then fill out the reset password form. Use the arrow button located on the bottom left of the page. If the user data is not found in the database, an error will pop up.
So now we will do a little demonstration of our application. We open the jar file by double clicking it. That's the splash screen. We will try to create an account here. Here's the privacy consent dialog. We'll just click yes. And the registration is successful. Then we will attempt to log into our newly created account. So here it is. This is the main menu of Lumen. So first we'll take a look at the sidebar. Here there are 3 features on the sidebar. We'll take a look at the word of the day. So this is a randomly generated word. And then the help file, how to use define. There are 3 pages in the help file. First, second, and third. We navigate inside the help file by using this arrow. The about covers our team members. We'll head back to the main menu. We'll take a look at the define feature. We'll see select a word from the list. Let's try biscuit. Then here's the definition for the word biscuit. We'll try searching for a word, for example, among. And then press the enter button. And it yields the same output as the definition of the word among. So users have the option to select a word from the list or entering a word on the search bar and pressing the enter key. For the translate feature, it is a similar process. First, select a list preference. We'll select Indonesian here. Select word, and the English translation will be displayed on the result bar. Same goes to the English list. And we'll select adventure here, and the translation is over here. You can also search for a word. For example, we want to translate biscuit to Indonesian. Then press the enter key. And here's the translation. Now we'll head back to the main menu and press exit to log out. So that's a little demo for our application. Thank you.